I ran an investment strategy that allocated capital on the basis of character in the early 2000s. And one of our inspirations was Jim Collins' Level 5 Leaders. And we would look for those
Yeah.
characteristics in leaders. And the portfolio did really well. And then I went off and did other things. And I came back and I discovered this guy named Fred Keel wrote a book called Return on Character. And he essentially proved out that high character CEOs tend to outperform selfish CEOs or
Mhm.
self-centered CEOs. But he defined character this way in the four pillars. But I think within these four pillars, judgment is kind of over above all of them. And that is, integrity, responsibility, forgiveness, and compassion. And so he goes into how telling the truth on the integrity side, keeping your promises, acting consistently with your principles, responsibility, taking responsibility for personal choices, admitting mistakes and failures, forgiveness, letting go of one's mistakes, letting go of your own mistake, focusing on what is right versus what is wrong, compassion, empathy with other, asking for help, empowering others, actively caring
Mm.
for others. These are the things that we look for in sitting CEOs of it within the public markets. I'd be interested in your perspective on that as a character habits. To look for. How does that resonate with your research and your experience in the industry and the way you think about the world?
Yeah. Well, I love this because it jives well with the intellectual humility thing in particular, right? Taking responsibility for your mistakes and failures, admitting that is, if you do that in front of people, that is displaying intellectual humility. Doing that internally is so good for learning and growth. But offering that same thing to other people, the forgiveness part, is also modeling that intellectual humility is valued. So I love that. And yeah, I mean, we've done my team and I and some collaborators in academia have done quite a bit of study on the elements of intellectual humility. One of the big ones is separating your ego from your ideas. That's one that has a high correlation to adaptation in business and to leadership panning out well. So I really like these. What I would say, how this like in my personal vocabulary, these four pillars, uh, to me, I would call them wisdom filters, because sometimes there's going to be, and what a wisdom filter is we have all of these principles. Some of us have different values, different principles that we care about more than others. If you value something, it's going to cost you something. So if you value integrity, sometimes employing integrity will cost you money because you could have made money if you just were dishonest. That's what values are about. But sometimes values come into conflict. So, let's say patience and decisiveness. Sometimes the bears come in to eat your friend. You got to decide, which one do you value more, patience or decisiveness? Uh, but I think compassion and forgiveness versus responsibility, those are really interesting because you could see some scenarios where those could come into conflict, but actually not really. Like these, I have a hard time finding moral dilemmas between these two. You can say that justice and mercy can sometimes have a moral dilemma. Do we show mercy on this offender, or do we seek justice? And that's these are big philosophical questions, and we have to do these in business. But when is integrity going to come into conflict with responsibility? When is compassion going to come into conflict with forgiveness? I have a hard time seeing that. So I really like these as, there's others that we will have to grapple with it and think about. But when you're making a decision that's hard, you could run it through these filters. Is this decision, how do we make this a compassionate decision? How do we make this a decision that, allows us to take responsibility? And I think, I could be wrong, but I think you'll be hard pressed to be like, well, we can do compassion, but we can't do responsibility. You can do compassion and maybe not do justice, but that's a trade off you can make.